Welcome to the #1 source for information, news, and opinion on your Columbus Blue Jackets. This is CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. You can also find the audio version on the CBJ Radio SoundCloud page, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play Music, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Now here's your host, Bob McElligott.
Welcome to CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Well, something happened in the hockey world this week that hasn't happened in 83 years. As a matter of fact, in the existence of one league, it never, ever happened until this week. And I'll tell you what that is coming up in just a few moments. But first, I've got to tell you about my friends at Telhio Credit Union. You know, in these trying times, money's a big issue. And you want to make sure that your money is in a good place. You want to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck, I guess you could say. Well, Telhio Credit Union is the place for you to put that money because they have many different options for you, whether it's a personal account that you're looking for. It could be a checking account, could be a savings account. Maybe it is a business, small business loan, whatever the case may be. Telhio Credit Union is where you can go to make sure that you're being taken care of in the right way. If you'd like to find out more, you can do it right now. All you have to do is go online to their website at telhio.org. Right there, you have all the information literally at your fingertips. And if there's something you can't find, all you have to do is go to the live chat option on the right-hand side of the screen during business hours. They would be happy to answer every question that you have. Telhio Credit Union is open to everyone in Central and Southwestern Ohio, and they're federally insured by NCUA. Well, this week, the American Hockey League canceled the remainder of the regular season and the playoffs. Hadn't been done in 83 years. Dave Andrews is the president and CEO of the American Hockey League. He is about ready to retire, but he's coming right now to tell us all about the decision behind canceling the rest of the season in the AHL, about where the league has been, where it's heading, and what part he is still going to have in it. Well, earlier this week, the American Hockey League had to do something it has not done in its 83-year history, and that is cancel the rest of the regular season and the Calder Cup playoffs. Right now, I'm joined by Dave Andrews, who is the president and CEO of the American Hockey League. You know, Dave, again, one thing that used to be a constant was the AHL was going to have its season. It went through the Second World War, the 2004-2005 lockout that ended the NHL season before it even began. The American Hockey League played the entire way through. So this is a first. And for you, ironically, this is your last year, a 26-year tenure as the president and CEO, and your last year has ended like this. Not the way you planned it, is it?
Not exactly. No, it's not what I had in mind, but you know, it's the same for all of us, right? None of us, had ever planned to go through something like this in their lives, and none of us have the playbook for it. And I think we're all being pretty resilient, actually. Like 9 weeks of working from home and working remotely and managing all of the things we're having to manage in my job, but everybody else across the country and whatever jobs they have or have lost, it's a pretty tough time. And we seem to be a pretty resilient bunch. So, we often quite proudly have been able to say that, we played 83 years nonstop. And I guess we can still say that as long as we don't miss anything next year, as long as we can play next year, which I believe we will. So we will have just not presented the cup. And I've been in this chair as president for more than half of the games played all time in the American Hockey League because we've expanded the league so much and our schedules are longer than they were in the old days. So, but I'll probably be remembered as the guy that didn't present the Calder Cup in 2020.
Well, that might be a footnote, but that's not going to be the case. You've done a million things for the American Hockey League in your tenure there since 1994. And I want to get to that, and I will get to that in just a second here. But at what point, as things were going on in the NHL, what kind of discussions were you having, and what point did you realize that, hey, this is going to be something, it's going to affect us, there's no doubt, and we're going to have to make some decisions coming up here?
Well, we were in Boston on March 11th with all of our staff and attending the Ace Bailey Foundation dinner in Boston, which is one of our principal charities as a group. And so we always take the whole staff down. They spend the day in planning meetings, and so I ended up I couldn't attend the meetings because we were starting to get a feel that something was happening, and we knew that a couple of our buildings were already looking at playing without fans in the building that coming weekend. And we're trying to make sure we canvassed every team in the league to see where we were at. And we came to a determination that night at about 6 o'clock that we would play through the weekend, and the teams were going to play without people in the building, and the traveling teams would go in, and everything was going to work. And then we would regroup on Monday, knowing that some tough times are ahead and we might not play, but we wanted to get the weekend in. And so that night at 6 o'clock, we made that decision. By 8 o'clock, the NBA had announced they had a positive test and they were shutting down the NBA. And one of the things we knew was when a player tests positive, that'll be when it all comes to a halt, right? So, I was in touch with Bill Daly that evening and again early the next morning, and the NHL moved to shut down, and we moved to shut down that afternoon. And, we suspended play then, and I guess it became obvious to us probably within about a week that it was unlikely we would be able to come back based on what public health authorities were saying, both nationally and at the state level. And our players, we wanted to let our players get home. And, they were beginning to close the border down in Canada. And we said, we've got to let these kids go. So we advised our teams to allow the players to go home. And once we did that, I think it was pretty clear, we're probably not going to get to come back. We have a much different league than the NHL. We're gate driven and we have no television revenue to speak of. And so, we don't operate very well without fans. I mean, you can do it for, some games, but you can't do it for 3 or 4 months. It just doesn't work financially. So I think we knew then, but we wanted to keep our options open, and the NHL was obviously keeping theirs open. They still are. But I'd say about 2 weeks ago, it became pretty clear that we needed to start focusing really on 2021 and really dig in and start to build schedules and look at schedule models and look at all of the various ways in which we will be able to play next year. Once we did that, we said, it's time. Like we suspended till May. It's May, and we know we're not going to be able to come back. So let's bring closure to it. So it was no surprise to anyone, and I think when I notified our board that we were going to meet, it was a pretty short meeting. Like it was as most Zoom calls go, it was pretty quick. It was it was a unanimous vote, and we all felt badly about it, but we had to move on.
The way the league is set up with the ownership of the teams, you have a mix there. You have some teams that are owned by their NHL parent clubs. Then you have other teams that are independently owned. I spent a decade with one of those in Syracuse with Howard Dolgan as the owner there. What are the conversations like? How do they differ between those teams that are owned by the NHL teams and then the independent operators who, as you said, you're a gate-driven league. They've got to sell tickets. They've got to sell advertising. So I would imagine a lot's the same, but there's got to be a little difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, with the NHL-owned teams and their focal point is their focus is player development, and with the independent-owned teams, they need to be successful businesses and viable in the long term. I would say for the most part, there's very little difference in approach though between the NHL clubs. There's the NHL-owned clubs. They probably are in favor of more practice time and a few less games, and where the independent owners need the gate receipts and the revenue from the games. It's probably the only area where you ever have where you can look and say, well, the NHL teams have this position and the independent owners have this position. The rest of the time we're one league and everybody works together. I think as we look ahead to 2021, we have some of our independent teams are, it's not like the league used to be where we have a lot of very small markets with community ownership groups, that kind of thing. Like we have pretty, Columbus's affiliate is the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're not exactly a mom and pop shop. Like they're one of the strongest, sports franchises in North America. So, our independent owners are not at risk. They have solid financial assets, and we have not worried about a team being sustainable for a long time in the American League. I mean, there was a time when I earned my stripes because we had a lot of financial challenges and we had to get through them. But that's not something I worry about anymore. Having said that, as you look ahead to 2021, the ability or the interest of some of those teams, and maybe all of our teams, including the NHL-owned teams, to play an extended season in empty buildings is probably, the appetite's not going to be great for that. If we couldn't get back to play, I think we'd be looking at, some teams will probably have some sort of structure where they can have their development players active, and we would support that and find a way to do it. But I don't think we're going to get there. I think we're going to. We built a schedule. We're building a schedule right now for October to April, and that's what we would have been doing anyway. We're also building schedule models for November start, December start, January start, shorter schedules, maybe shorter playoffs. We've got all kinds of different scenarios built into those for our teams to consider, and we're starting to gather information now on how all of these things look to our various stakeholders in the NHL and the AHL. So we're hard at it. We want to be out ahead of it, but there's so much uncertainty, Bob, as you know. Everything from borders to airplanes to public health authorities in 31 different cities. They're not all going to come online at the same time in terms of being able to play, and the rules may be different in different states and different cities, different jurisdictions. So we're going to have to be pretty nimble, I think, as we move along and be ready to adjust to whatever we're faced with.
Talking with Dave Andrews, he is the outgoing president and CEO of the American Hockey League. And Dave, when you took that job in 1994, the league looks so much different than it looks today. As you mentioned, there's been so much expansion you've gone through, and you have the league up to 31 teams now to match up with every NHL team. And you've got the league is bigger than ever. I mean, it just takes over all of North America now. There was a time when you could look at the American Hockey League and you could see that cluster of teams right there in New England. And, once you got outside of that, that was the outskirts of the league. And now it's all over the place. When you look back at all the years that you spent there, is there one thing that stands out to you as if you were to say, this is the thing I'm most proud of. This is the thing that I hope people remember the most about my time in the American Hockey League when I was running it as president?
I don't think there is one thing. Like I would, those that have seen what's transpired since 1994 that have been around the game a while, I think I would hope that they recognize that I made a difference, and that I was able to work with people to help us grow the league to where it is today. I think there were a couple of watershed moments along the way. I think 2001 when we took over the top 6 teams in the IHL that was about to fold. Really made the biggest difference in terms of where we are today versus where we were in 1994. It gave us a more of a national footprint. It gave us 6 really strong markets and strong owners, and it eliminated our competition. Let's be honest. If we were battling with the IHL tooth and nail every day for 7 years, and had you asked anyone which of those 2 leagues is going to still be standing, in the year 2000 when I came in, nobody would have said the AHL was going to still be standing. It would have been the other one. And so we battled and scratched and got ourselves in a position, where we were the one that was left standing, and that really set the table for who we are today as a league. And then 2015 was big because we moved, had the big move out to the West Coast, and then that move to California has spawned teams in Arizona and Colorado, and next year Nevada. So, for me, it's just kind of being able to look back and say, we achieved a lot. We built something really good for hockey, because for the National Hockey League, when I was in the American League as a general manager, all you ever heard was people saying, man, if we could ever get one league for the NHL developing players that's dedicated to prospect development, what a dream that would be. Well, we have it now. And it's funny, Bob, like the only reflection you're so busy right now, there's not much reflecting on anything because it's just a lot of work. But I'm looking back at 26 years, and now like 90% of the players in the NHL are coming through from our league. at least, for a cup of coffee or sometimes for 3 or 4 years, but they're coming through our league and becoming pros here. Almost all of the coaches in the NHL, all the referees, almost all the linesmen, a lot of the broadcasters. Like if you look at it, there's a lot of people that come through the league, and when you've been in it as long as I have, like, so everybody that came through the AHL that's in the NHL now came through while I was president. So, it's kind of a cool thing to look at. So it's good. I'm very grateful. I've had a great run. I'm getting to go out on my own terms. The fact that we're going out like this is not great, but it is what it is. Like, everybody's having a hard time now.
I remember back when you absorbed those teams from the International Hockey League. I'd just been in the American League for 2 years, and you're right. I remember how big that was, because there were some big market teams that were all of a sudden coming into the league. And as you said, you eliminated the competition because, yes, as a young broadcaster, you leave the East Coast Hockey League and you go to the American Hockey League, and you go from one small market in one league to a small market in the other league, and you're wondering those things like, well, is this team going to survive? Is this league going to survive? And now, it's very easy to look back on it all these years later, but there never should have been any worry because of the way it all worked out. It's amazing how strong it is right now. And again, I don't want you to sell yourself short. I know that there were a lot of things that you were doing behind the scenes, and I'm sure you had many, many conversations and negotiations and all those things to get all of that done and bring it all together. And then you've got to work in harmony with the National Hockey League to make it all work. So it's not an easy job. I think people, if you just look at it, it's kind of a glamorous job, but there's a lot of hard work behind that glamour, isn't there, Dave?
There's a lot of work, but it is I mean, a lot of people would want to change places with you for sure. I mean, it's a pretty great job. I've met a lot of wonderful people, and a lot of people who, when I was a kid, I watched play, like, Johnny Bauer and John Beliveau and Bobby Orr, and you can go on and on. I mean, all these guys that were great players back in the day. I've gotten to be friends with, and Bill Torrey, the late Bill Torrey, became a great friend, and Johnny Bauer became a great friend because he was a great supporter of our league and probably the most famous player ever to come through our league. So, all of that stuff is pretty cool. It's been a great experience and a good run, and who gets to do that? Like, it's been good.
Jody Shelley and I talk all the time, and he has this saying that I think is dead on.
A proud Nova Scotian, I might add.
That's right. Yeah. Of course. Yes. Yeah. You guys have that in common too.
Yeah.
But he always says this, and I completely agree with him. And when you were talking about all the different people, whether it's players, officials, broadcasters, whatever it is that came through the American Hockey League to the NHL, Jody always says it is there that you just learn what to do, and you learn who you are in all of those things. And to be honest, Dave, I agree with him. You know how to act. I knew how to act when I came to the National Hockey League because of my time in the American Hockey League. And that might sound funny to somebody on the outside that's never gone through it, but I think the players are the same way. I mean, there's a way to do things. There's a right way to do things. And you learn that right way in the American Hockey League. And that's what makes the overall development, as you say, a development league. That's what makes it so valuable, isn't it?
It's true. And I think also, the hockey community is a tight-knit community, and it's really been great to see the allegiance that, players have, like guys like Jody and coaches, John Cooper down in Tampa, like those guys stay in touch, and they all look back fondly on their time in the American League. Like when they were there, they might not have thought it was so fun because they were riding buses and they wanted to be in the NHL and they weren't getting there as fast as they wanted. But it's amazing once they get there, how fondly they look back on the time they spent in the American Hockey League and how important it was in their development, but also how much fun they had. And the pressure's a little less in the AHL than it is in the NHL for everybody. And I'm sure same for you in your career. And as you look back, lots of crazy things happen, and it's just fond memories. And we bring our, we have our Hall of Fame inductions and things like that. When you bring the players back, they have a great time, and the reminiscing is pretty cool.
And another way the league has changed, I was just having a conversation with Nick Foligno about this a couple of days ago. the league, even when I got there, I mean, fighting was still very prevalent at all levels of hockey. But there were some great characters in the time that I was in the league. Jody Shelley was one of them, of course. But, you know, you had your Frank Bialowises, you had your Dennis Bonvies, guys that were,
Yeah.
they were and they are cult heroes. Yeah,
Another Nova Scotian, Dennis Wandy.
exactly. But
I actually signed Dennis to his first pro contract.
you did? So you're responsible for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was general manager of the Cape Breton Oilers, and we were lacking toughness, and he was without a team. He was at home in Frankville, Nova Scotia, and he had played. He tried out in Calgary for their team and fought a bunch of our guys and beat them up. And our coach said, we need some toughness. And I said, well, Dennis Bonvi's down the road about 2 hours. He said, well, let's get him in. And I still remember bringing him in, and our coach saw him in practice that morning, and he said, he can't skate. I said, well, that's not what you asked for.
That's right. And he spent a long time in that league.
But he taught him to, you know what? He taught him to skate. And Dennis is my favorite story as a player in all my time in the American League, because Dennis made more with what he had and the gifts that he was given than anybody I've ever seen in hockey. And he wasn't a goon. Like he learned to play, and got to the point where he had a one-way contract in the National Hockey League and playing regularly and not just going out and fighting. Like he could play, like not quite as good as Jody, but not far off. And for him to be able to do that from where he started as a 21-year-old, it's amazing. And it's just dedication, right? Believing in himself, and he just kept going. Never stopped.
Oh yeah, and I saw a lot of him. He spent those years in Wilkes-Barre with the bulk of them when I was in Syracuse, and he was a fun guy to watch. But there were a lot of guys like that. There are a lot of guys that are still cult heroes in all of those cities that came through and kind of made the league, especially earlier in your tenure, made the league what it was. And now, just like the NHL, it's gone away from a lot of that, and it's turned itself into a skill league.
Well, it has for sure, and it's the right thing. I mean, it's a different world we live in today, and those guys are, as it started to phase out, the guys that were playing that role or fulfilling that role on teams were a lot more dangerous than the guys were before. They're bigger men and better trained, and I think what we've done is the right thing, and the game is much better than it was back in those days. But you're right, some of the characters were fun to be around, and all of those guys were really good people. They're fun people to be with.
Well, Dave, as you're outgoing, and again, I'm talking with Dave Andrews. He is the outgoing president and CEO of the American Hockey League after a 26-year tenure. And you went through a selection process to figure out who was going to succeed you in that position. And lo and behold, it's a guy that has a very strong Columbus connection, and that is the former general manager here, Scott Housen. I imagine you and Scott are working together now remotely, socially distanced, of course.
Yeah.
But what's that process like in working with Scott and getting him ready to take over that role, especially with what's going on in the world and in your league right now?
Well, I've known Scott for 26 years. I've had two jobs in the last 33 years. One of them was general manager of the Cape Breton Oilers. When I left the Cape Breton Oilers, guess who took over? Scott Housen.
History repeats itself then, right?
History is repeating itself. And so I've known Scott a long time. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a very good person. He's got a great, solid hockey pedigree. He's been around the American League off and on for many years. So he'll do a great job. He's got terrific integrity, as you know. And we're in training mode. And it was supposed to be, he was supposed to join the league on May 1st and work with me for 2 months as kind of job shadowing. And the job shadowing has all been done remotely. And it actually started probably around first week of April, because he was also stuck at home. He couldn't travel with the Oilers. So we did a lot of work during the month of April, and now, he's pretty much almost completed the orientation process, I would say. And now he's working with me in a number of projects, and he'll be ready by July 1st to take over, and I'll be ready to let him take over. But he's coming in at a difficult time. I thought we had the table set pretty well for him. Like if you wanted a great job, coming in here on July 1st of 2020, if it weren't for what happened in March, would have been a pretty sweet deal, because our league's in great shape. We have a new collective bargaining agreement. We have all sorts of new sponsors agreements. We've got new deals with the NHL, and here we go. Like, now he's coming in, and we've got a challenging year ahead of us. And but I'll be there for him and help him, and he'll be great. He'll do a good job.
And I was going to ask you, once you are out of your role, how much hockey are you still going to take in?
Probably a lot. Like, I'm pretty much addicted to watching it, on television, and it's crazy now. Like, not having hockey, I'm used to it now, but not having hockey on TV, and I can't watch the old games. It's just doesn't do it for me. But I've never watched Netflix. Like, honestly, all I ever watch on is the news and hockey. And I don't want to watch the news now because it's too depressing, and,
Right.
and there's no hockey to speak of. So all of a sudden I'm a Netflix addict, in the evenings. Every day is the same. You get up and work for 12 hours and then you eat late and watch Netflix. But it's, there'll be lots of hockey in my life, and I'm going to still be involved with the AHL. I'm going to be chairman of the board beginning July 1st and continue to support Scott. And it's more of a ceremonial function, but still get to go to games and go to meetings and hang out with the guys. So I'm looking forward to it. I had a lot of kind of false starts at retirement over the last 5 or 6 years. My retirement was rumored regularly, and that was because I was thinking about it for quite a while, and I had a contract that kind of let me do that. And every year they said, "Do you want to go or are you going to stay?" And I said, "Well, your call, but I'll stay if you want." And then a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, is when I said, I think enough's enough. And I haven't really had a second thought about it. It's time. It's time to figure out what else you can do in your life other than this. But I'll stay close to it.
Yeah, and it's much like many of the players that retire, as you said, you're still going to get to be around the boys, and really that's what makes the game so special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, from all of the players that you've met and dealt with and speak to and have relationships with, what they miss is the room. They don't necessarily miss the game that much. They miss the people, and that's what we're all going to miss. And that's what's really hard. The only thing that's really bothering me about about kind of going out this year and with everything that's going on is I'm not getting to see, like I had a lot of plans for, in the last 2 or 3 months of who I was going to spend some time with, and some of the travels, some of the meetings I was going to where I knew it was my last meeting, and we'd have a little celebration. And so none of that's happening. There's a pretty good chance I won't see my staff in person. And a lot of them have worked with me for 15, 20 years. And there's a pretty good chance I'll be out of here and off to the next stop, and won't have a chance to see them until sometime later whenever we get back to play.
Well, that of course is unfortunate, and unfortunate it is the world that we live in right now. But
Yeah.
Dave, I want to thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it. Of course, I've known you for a long time, from my tenure in the American Hockey League and 10 years there, and now 10 years here in the National Hockey League. And I just want to personally thank you. I mean, what you did in that league, the way you worked with that league, the way that you worked, especially with the small market teams like the one that I was in, allowed them to be viable and be a big part of what was going on. And as we said before, it helped me to figure it out, to learn the way I needed to do things myself, so I was ready when I got to the National Hockey League. So thank you so much for the way that you have been the steward for the AHL for the past 26 years. And I wish you nothing but the best in your retirement.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and stay safe.
That is Dave Andrews. He is the president and the chief executive officer of the American Hockey League, but his tenure is coming to an end, as you heard. Scott Housen, the former Blue Jackets general manager, is going to be taking over that role, but Dave will still be involved in hockey, as well he should be. A very good man. He's done great things for the sport, and it's good to hear that he's still going to be involved in some way, shape, or form. Hey, speaking of good people in the sport and doing things for other people, Cam Atkinson, Blue Jackets forward, is doing just that. And he is doing it through a virtual 5K. That's right. It's coming up in early June, June 4th through the 7th. It'll be a virtual 5K. You've got 3 days to complete this 5K. You can run, you can walk, you can bike, you can rollerblade, you can do whatever you want and however you want to get through your 5K. Cam is doing it to raise funds for a machine that is going to do testing for the coronavirus. The people on the front lines are going to be able to be tested and get those results in a hurry. So that's what the funds are going towards, and that's how you can help out by being a part of it. All you have to do is register online at fnf5k.com. That's all you do. Just go on there and you can register. And if you register by the end of May, if you register by May 31st, you are going to get a T-shirt. And what Cam would like for you to do is once you get the T-shirt, put the T-shirt on and do a social media post about registering for the virtual 5K, that you're going to be a part of it. You can't wait to be a part of it. And take a picture of yourself and your family, your friends, whoever it is, wearing the shirt, because then you can put it out there and help to get the message out even further to more people so more people can become involved. Again, it's all through Cam Atkinson's personal charity, the Force Network Fund, FNF. That's where it comes from, FNF5K.com. You can register. And again, do it by the end of May. You get the T-shirt. You get a medal. You get a medal before you even have to run or walk or do anything, right? So it's a whole new world. You get your medals early, but you only get it if you get registered by May 31st. So make sure that you do help Cam and help others in the community, especially during these trying times. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of CBJin30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Thanks again to Dave Andrews, the president and CEO of the American Hockey League, for joining me, and thank you for always being there, as always. Until next time, I'm Bob McElligott saying so long.